name's Michael Anthony. I'm the executive chef and partner of Gramercy Tavern. I became interested in grains probably, I'm guessing it must be about 6 or 7 years ago, intensely interested in using them both at home and at Gramercy Tavern. When the arrival of Cayuga Pure Organics happened at the Greenmarket. It wasn't my first encounter with cooking with grains. In New York City, if you look across the board, people had already become at a very wide level familiar with farro. There were a couple of grains, wheat berries, barley. Obviously those grains were well known and well used, but we weren't really so familiar with using grains like emmer, einkorn, and to a certain degree spelt, and other preparations like frika. So there was kind of an opening of my eyes and a bit of an opportunity with both the arrival of Cayuga Pure Organics and when I met Zaid and Haifa from Norwich Meadows Farm. They're of Jordanian origin, and they talked to me a lot about the grains that they grew up eating, and when they would come back from seasonal trips home to visit their families, they would bring things like frika that were produced artisanally. The familiarity with those grains, the availability of them changed the landscape of eating from the Greenmarket. We were able to not only bring home fresh fruits and vegetables, but we were able to stock our pantries with dried products, and that was a real breakthrough. We also simultaneously, I've been working at Gramercy Tavern for 8 years now. One of our kind of major changes in that time period is in an attempt to redefine what luxury eating is all about. We were focusing on celebrating modest ingredients. We were trying to tell a story about what's different about eating here in the Northeast compared to eating in another region. All the while fighting to avoid this notion of suggesting that Gramercy Tavern is elitist or acting in any way, trying to secure exclusive products. In every effort that we made, things that we put on our menu, we wanted to make sure that people understood where we got them and that they could get them too. It's only logical that if these are ingredients that we love, that we would have to help find more outlets for those ingredients, not less. In that time period, you guys started to promote the Northeast Grain Initiative, and it opened yet some new doors. It allowed us to start to recognize folks out there who were interested in searching high and low around the world for ancient heirloom varieties of grains, connecting with local farmers in the Northeast who were doing tests to see if they would actually be able to produce those grains. An interesting conversation about sharing equipment so that those products could be brought to market. Now more than ever, chefs have become participants in the kind of foods that are available at the Greenmarket and through other local sources, and yet even looking closer to try to share dreams of what certain products that don't exist yet might look like or taste like by actually working with breeders. And so this all of that culminates with June asking if we'd be willing to help out with a sensory taste trial for Emmer. So we literally made several recipes of pasta using different percentages of Emmer flour to study its flavor characteristics and its textural characteristics. We make different recipes at the restaurant, and today was really all about trying to zero in on sharing some sort of conclusions about taste and texture. The flavor's not new, so we're familiar with that flavor profile and completely enamored with it. If anything, I think that there is a certain, while the scientific community will want to study the specifics of the properties of the Emmer flour, I would say the only thing I was surprised at is really truly how interesting and delicious the texture of that pasta is. Sometimes I think it's worth echoing really loudly the most obvious characteristic is that chefs will genuinely enjoy and can use these flours. They're not impossibly difficult to figure out how to incorporate into recipes, but we do have to understand that we can't simply substitute them into recipes that we're already familiar with, that they do have properties of their own that need to be recognized and described. And ultimately, chefs, and in particular pastry chefs, need to know that ahead of time going into using these things, so that it's not each restaurant and each chef isn't, kind of embarking on a dark walk through the forest. If they become familiar with the products and can build off of previous experiences, they're more likely to buy it. At Gramercy Tavern, there are a lot of menu items that actually feature Emmer, and with our food philosophy, we've kind of looked at what a lot of restaurants treat as a golden rule, that on a menu, a well-balanced, interesting menu, you serve one ingredient at some point during a menu or present it on the menu. You're really kind of not supposed to show it again. There should be a repetition too often of ingredients that show up on a restaurant menu, but I've never really fully understood that story, and we've never really subscribed to following that rule, and we've actually done the opposite. So when it is cucumbers first arrive, we challenge ourselves to use cucumbers in as many different ways as we possibly can, and they show up all over our menu. When we kind of saw the availability of Emmer and more of these grains, we said, look, what it needs is for people to see all of the ways in which these things can be used. Let's try to challenge ourselves to use them in as many different ways as possible. Not simply create a risotto substituting Emmer for the rice, but what interesting dishes can really be made that show off the quality of eating Emmer. Some of those happen to use the whole grain. We like to cook it and use it as a base, sometimes incorporating other pureed vegetables like sweet garlic puree, and then sauteing another vegetable like zucchini that's then finished with touches of infused oil and other fresh chopped herbs, and it makes in and of itself a really interesting stew. So there are kind of endless varieties of handling the whole grain in a very moist, kind of light stew-like preparation. Now these aren't really traditional dishes that are kind of one pot dishes. They're actually components that are cooked and held until the last moment, so that when the dish is fired, the grains are already tender, held at room temperature, but then finished by cooking some sauteed garlic and shallots, adding the grains, finishing with aromatic components like the oil and the purees, and then a touch of fresh herbs, and a lead component. I mentioned zucchini. We also use the milled flour in the form of pasta, which we're studying today, but we'll taste a little later that some of those are fresh cut pastas, some of them are sheets that are turned into lasagna. The end goal is that we want to get to know everybody who's involved in the process, people who are generating and growing and milling and selling and studying Emmer. I really do believe that it's an interesting alternative food, and that it's genuinely delicious. I know that there is a growing market there, and chefs are good at sharing enthusiasm.